community comes to you compliments. Republic Bank, we're the one for you. Classic Lighting, Budget Marine Grenada, Spicer Imaging Center, Hubbard's, Grenada Paper Products, Quick and Easy, Royal, and Horizon Paper Towels.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Climate Reality. It is season 2 and we are into episode 8. And this evening we continue yet again with our discussion on community level climate change interventions. However, this week we're focusing on education. And we have quite a wonderful contingent from the Ministry of Education with us this evening. I'm really looking forward to our discussion with them. But more so tonight, I am assisted by no stranger to the program, Miss Martina Duncan. Martina, good evening, and it's such a pleasure to have you with me to address issues with the Ministry of Education. I couldn't have done it alone.
Thank you. Good evening, Godfrey, and good evening to our viewers and listeners. I'm very happy to join you in this capacity on the program. Thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed. So I'll tell you what, folks, in a little bit, we'll have our guests introduce themselves to you, so I'm not going to say anything. I'll just, as much as they are from the Ministry of Education in different capacity. So this week, we are looking at the education sector and its dual role of helping the population to build resilience to climate change and reducing its carbon footprint. Knowledge and awareness of climate change is one of the most important weapons that we have in the arsenal in responding to climate change. If we are aware of the problem and its potential impacts, then we are better placed to craft effective responses and to minimize its negative impacts. Now, one avenue for building such knowledge and awareness is through our education system, which has the overall responsibility of preparing our young people and hence our population for understanding and coping with climate change. Education is a critical agent in addressing the issue of climate change. Education can encourage people to change their attitudes and behavior. Education also helps them to make informed decisions. In the classroom, young people can be taught the impact of global warming and learn how to adapt to climate change. Education empowers all people, but especially motivates the young to take action. Knowing the facts helps eliminate the fear of an issue which is frequently colored by gloom and doom in the public arena. It is therefore extremely important to tap into the minds and imaginations of our young children to capture what it means to be a child growing up in the age of rapid climate change. We will go to a break, and when we come back, this week in climate, and this week we will be focusing on climate and agriculture. Stay with us. We take a break. We'll be right back.
Whether you're shopping for hardware, building materials, and appliances, Hubbard's Building Supplies at Grandans is the place to shop. With improved facilities, increased parking, wider variety of products, and a trendy and spacious layout, catering for all your shopping needs. Why wait? Visit Hubbard's Building Supplies today. Now open Mondays to Fridays, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Hubbard's. Quality service, affordable prices.
How do you choose your toilet paper? Just because it's soft and light. That's how I choose my toilet paper. Made right here in the Isle of Spice. Cherish Springs off Harbor Bay. Super value every day. The price is right and locally they're made. Support local when you purchase Cherish and other quality brands from Grenada Paper Products.
is the champion. We lighten up the whole Caribbean. Solar Vision is the champion. We lighten the whole Caribbean. The ultimate solution to get rid of pollution. We going green to be healthy. Going green for security. Going green for prosperity. Going green with Solar Vision. We going green.
Available at Grenada Trade Center, Montrouge, St. George. For more information, call 444-5291 or 404-9012.
Building or renovating your home or business? Why not use clean, renewable energy? Install solar panels to power your home and office and see your energy costs go down and your savings go up. Using renewable solar-powered energy protects our environment, reduces our carbon footprint, and slows the devastating impact of climate change. Republic Bank can help to finance construction and renovations that make use of renewable energy. Visit any Republic Bank branch and ask about renewable energy financing options today.
Republic Bank, we're the one for you.
Your life is yours, your future's in your hands. Your body is yours, that's why you need a plan. You gotta plan your family, avoid HIV, get the education from the Grenada Planned Parenthood Association.
We offer STI screening, gender-based violence counseling, prenatal and postnatal checks, injectables, condoms, pap smears, and other sexual reproductive services. Open Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The Pointe Street, St. George's. Whether male or female, it doesn't matter. We're here to make your life better.
Grenada Planned Parenthood Association.
For appointments, call 440-3341.
Have you heard about the new Softweave bathroom tissue with total hygiene? As hygiene and safety have taken center stage, our bathroom tissue is now manufactured with 3 different technologies to offer the best protection for you and your family. UVC light technology for a safe and effective disinfection process, eliminating 99.9% of microorganisms. Also, production at high temperatures, killing all types of germs and bacteria. And it's pH controlled with delicate fibers to prevent irritation for even sensitive skin. Softweave Total Hygiene Bathroom Tissue, available in supermarkets and shops island-wide. Visit Softweave Caribbean Facebook or Instagram pages for more information.
Our environment is our responsibility. Budget Marine contributes by selling environmentally friendly products. For example, we sell lightweight open boats that require a relatively small engine. Best to combine with our Tohatsu 4-stroke engines. They use little fuel and have a low emission. Carib Marine solar panels are specially made to withstand the Caribbean climate. The panels are suitable for use at home and on the boat. The required chargers and converters are also available from Budget Marine. Keeping your car and boat clean extends the lifespan. But residues of the cleaning products disappear in nature. We at Budget Marine sell eco-friendly cleaning products from EcoWorks, not harmful to nature and also clean very well. Plastic junk in our oceans is a major problem. Fortunately, there are companies that clean up and reuse the plastic into usable products. Marlowe, manufacturer of lines and ropes, produces docking lines made out of plastic waste. Another company is Sperry Shoes. Sperry has a collection made from used fabrics and plastic waste. Just a few examples of how we at Budget Marine contribute to help protecting our environment. We care.
Welcome back, everyone. Our climate reality, and of course we welcome all our viewers on GBN Television 7 and 11, our friends on our Facebook page and the YouTube channel, and our listeners on K105 FM. So it's just about time when we bring you our feature this week in climate, agriculture and climate change.
So when it comes to climate change, agriculture is one of the most important sectors because it's twofold. One, agriculture contributes to climate change, and on the other hand, it is one of the most significantly impacted sectors by climate change. Agriculture contributes to about 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And this is just from primary production. It doesn't include the value chain activities, right? So it is a significant amount of the overall emissions from greenhouse gases, which highlights the importance of the sector. So my presentation will go into some of the sources of the greenhouse gas emissions from the agriculture sector, and then some of the activities that farmers and the public can take to reduce the emissions from your agricultural practices. So, implications for climate change in regard to agriculture. I'm going to look at the main gases, the main greenhouse gases that are emitted from the agriculture sector. So we have carbon dioxide gas, methane, and nitrous oxide. And some of the activities that contribute to carbon dioxide emissions. We could look at land conversion or land clearing, or converting lands from non-agriculture uses to agriculture uses. The production of fertilizer for agriculture use, as well as things like irrigation, and here we speak in agriculture as well as forestry. So we also look at deforestation as well, reducing, emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. When we talk about methane, we can have methane from manure, the manure from the animals, burning of biomass, which is a vegetation. It could be man-made. It could be man-made burning. So when you cut your bush, you cut on your agriculture produce or the agriculture waste as well, and you burn that, you are emitting methane into the atmosphere. And of course, feed digestion, or we call it enteric fermentation by cattle. And then finally, in terms of the nitrous oxide emissions, that comes from the fertilized soils, as well as the production of fertilizers, as well as pesticides. So the more fertilizer and pesticides that we use, it contributes more to emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And then finally, manure. Again, manure. So manure produces both methane as well as nitrous oxide. So on the next slide, you would see here just this graphic that shows you basically like a farm where you're seeing the different gases that are being emitted from the different practices. So you see the trees are being cut down, releasing carbon dioxide. You're seeing the biomass and the waste, the food waste, agriculture waste, also emitting carbon dioxide, and then the burning of the waste, which is nitrous oxide, as well as methane and carbon dioxide. You also, even the tractor there's the use of the fuel in the tractor, and so that also contributes to reduce emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And of course, rice production as well contributes to emitting methane into the atmosphere. And of course the soil, tilling the soil and any significant disturbances to the soil would also reduce the carbon that is stored in soils. So those are the main areas or the main activities, agriculture-related activities that we find from the primary production that that emit greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So these are the main sources, right? So from that, we can easily think about some ways that we can reduce the contribution of the agriculture sector to greenhouse, so global warming, to climate change. And there are some very cost-effective ways that we can go about doing that. So in terms of the carbon dioxide, we can look at improving the management of croplands and reducing of the deforestation and forest degradation. So basically how you manage your crop. So there are different cropping methods, intercropping, crop rotation, and so on. There are ways that you can do it that doesn't involve or doesn't cause a lot of emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So those are some things to consider for carbon dioxide. For methane and nitrous oxide, we have things like improving the animal production and management of livestock, and improve soil nutrient management. So those are just some of the ways that some of the things that you can do to reduce our footprint when it comes to the agriculture sector.
Thank you very much. So that was our feature This Week in Climate. And, a lot of times when we speak of climate change, Martina, most people think about the weather, the extreme heat and excessive rain. But climate change affects every sector you can think about. And tonight we're talking education. So before we get into the discussion, we'll ask our guests to introduce themselves, and we will start with the lady first of all. She's Miss Nyla James. Miss James, good evening and welcome to Our Climate Reality.
Good evening, Godfrey. I appreciate you putting the lady first. Greetings to you, greetings to your viewers and listeners. I am Nyla James, the Senior Planning Officer at the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports and Culture. So ideally, I manage the unit tasked with the responsibility of strategic and corporate planning. We do policy development, alignment of work plans with the national priorities. We monitor and evaluate any projects and programs currently being implemented. And last but not least, we primarily deal with data management. So for instance, the annual statistical digest is housed and published within that unit. So it's our business to know a little bit of what's happening throughout the ministry and within the units, because we're expected to synergize what is happening with whatever the expectations and the mandate of education is. Thank you for having me. I look forward to the dialogue.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Ms. James. Mr. Douglas, good evening. Welcome. It's a pleasure. And he is the lone guest in studio with us this evening. That's apart from my co-host, Martina. So, Mr. Douglas, thank you for coming. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, well, good evening, Godfrey and Martina, and to all the viewing and listening audience. My name is Jason Douglas, and I am one of two curriculum officers in the area of science at the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports, and Culture. And as part of the role of a curriculum officer, we really look at the implementation, we monitor and analyze what's happening with the curriculum to ensure that things are up to date. We also provide capacity building, such as training and professional development for our teachers, and not just our teachers, but even in a broader scope, even for parents and so on. We provide information and general support for our teachers, so that at the end result, our students will get the best. So thank you for having me, and I look forward very much to the discussions tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Douglas. And finally, Mr. Pearson Stroud. Mr. Stroud, good evening and welcome to our program.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you for having me this evening together with my colleagues from the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports and Culture. My name is Pearson Stroud. I am the Director of Student Support Services in the Ministry of Education. I have responsibilities for guidance and counseling, spoon feeding, the the other areas that we also have under that is the school book program. We also have HIV response. I think I'm forgetting one, but school attendance. That's one of the more important ones. School attendance. So that's pretty much responsibilities that I hold. I have supervisory responsibility, I managerial responsibilities for those areas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stroud. Martina, you've listened to them. Quite a team we have from the ministry.
Yes, Godfrey.
Indeed. So I'll tell you what, we're going to start our discussion, and we will start again with the lady. Ms. James, from where you sit, and of course you did outline some of your responsibility, strategic and corporate planning, policy development. What are the climate change risks, that you see for the education sector, and what are the plans, or what plans does the sector have in managing those risks?
All right. So I think first off, it's important to understand that we are seeing a rise in the frequency and even the intensity of some of the weather systems and their associated conditions. I believe for the latter part or the second half of this year, it seemed as though almost every other day we were being informed that a system is being monitored. And in cases where the system was not even directly over Grenada, we still felt the impact. Things like heavy rainfall, flooding in areas, stronger winds, erosion, you name it. And so, of course, as these systems intensify, our schools become vulnerable. So if we're talking about risk, we understand that if there is flooding in an area that's prone to flooding, and we have a school in that area, and Wesley College jumps out as an example here, then the activities at the institution would be compromised. It means that if we are to evacuate the students and to ensure their safety, the staff as well, then you would have some loss of contact time. So that is a risk there to what is happening. Even in instances where you might have very intense disasters, a hurricane, for instance, because that's what we see this side of the pond based on where we are in the tropics, then you might have damage to your infrastructure. And again, that would cause disruption to learning. We have to also remember that our schools serve as shelters. So if we are in the hurricane season and God forbid we experience a hurricane that is severe enough to cause damage, it means that we might have citizens who are displaced. And if they are utilizing the schools as their homes, then we are not able to conduct formal face-to-face instruction. So we realize that those conditions, and then not to mention the heat. Godfrey, I was saying to a friend of mine, I miss the days when we had Christmas breeze. At this time of the year, you feel much cooler, and it's not happening. And it's because of this effect. The effects we're seeing would be directly correlated with climate change. And if you have a rise in temperature, imagine what a classroom environment looks like. So if we're talking about risk factors, that is directly along that line. Our students might feel uncomfortable, and of course they won't retain the information. Likewise, the teachers might feel hot, they might have a headache, and all of these symptoms related to excessive heat and so it means that we have to start thinking about how we can support them. One last thing I want to touch on before I talk about, the planning process is that of water shortages. And it might seem simple, but you have two sides of a coin where you might have heavy rainfall and it's necessary for NWASA to deal with their dams, maybe clean it out, and so the water is cut off in an area. On the flip side of things, if it's very hot, they might try to conserve water, and so they have, valve regulation. And think about how important water is to the functioning of a school. Something as basic as sanitation, so hand washing, flushing of toilets, that is compromised. And if the school is unable to source water maybe from a storage tank, then and when I say we, meaning from the end of ministry, we have to make a decision to cut that school day short, and again, loss of contact time. So all of this is saying to us, Godfrey, that when we are thinking about plans for the sector and in the planning process, there are several things we have to deliberately incorporate just so that we minimize some of these risks and the fallout from it. So one of the things we have been thinking about, and we continue to find ways to improve, is that early warning system, whereby the information related to crisis or disasters are provided to the relevant stakeholders in a timely and accurate manner. Now, I think it is safe to say we have a very good relationship with the National Disaster Management Agency. So if anyone is listening from that, kudos to you. And we appreciate the fact that our Chief Education Officer actually sits on the Emergency Response Committee. So what that means is that we have information early enough so that schools can be duly informed if there is a situation that requires them to evacuate or be mindful of something. All right. I want to touch a little on infrastructure, and I think that's one of the things where we are really bolstering our efforts with regard to the planning process and how we view schools and the construction of schools. So it's an ongoing effort, it's ongoing activity as it relates to school construction, rehabilitation, and so. And I think the word we have at the center of it all is resilience. So in our planning process now, we first of all ensure that the building codes are adhered to. And, we really appreciate the collaboration with Ministry of Infrastructure, for instance, the engineers there and the contractors. We ensure that we adhere to the building codes. We think about investing in designs where the building itself can withstand any impact, any harsh impact. We are going as far as featuring hurricane straps into the designs because we understand that we are in the tropics and we're at risk for things like that. We're considering the materials that we use in the school buildings, whether or not they can manage some of the rising temperatures, because that is important. And if we're not able to source materials that can withstand those temperatures, where are we putting windows? What is ventilation like in those schools? So all of those are considerations for us. We're also considering things like rainwater harvesting. And in fact, quite a number of the designs were revised to incorporate that. And I'm not going to touch on that because I'm sure Mr. Douglas will have something to say in that regard. So other little things like water storage tanks, so that there is a continuous supply and we don't have to disrupt learning if we don't have water on the plant. And regular assessment of whatever is existing, because of course we have new schools being built, but in some cases we just need to refurbish or upgrade an existing school. And so in retrofitting them, we think about everything else that is needed to withstand the effects of climate change that we're seeing. And the last thing I want to touch on, Godfrey, is this integrated approach. I think it's safe to say that we have so many moving pieces in education, and it is impossible based on resources, whether financial, human, and just time within the day to capture everything. So the planning process involves this integrated approach at the moment, whereby if we are dealing with one thing, and an example comes to mind here, we are about to launch what we call the Healthy Start Nutrition Program. And that is just a rebranding of the school feeding program with some targeted interventions. And one of the interventions is that of healthier lifestyles, healthier eating for students, and promoting this increase in the intake of water. So if we are going to talk to students and we have programs to get them to understand how water is important to their diet, then why not piggyback on that and say to them, all right, and water is so important to us, so we need to learn how to conserve it. All right. So this integrated approach is something that we're really trying to build into the planning process as we try to navigate in this world right now where climate change is really rearing its ugly head. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. James. Martina, quite some plans there as it relates to what is happening, based on what Ms. James has said. And some of the things she mentioned, I'm sure you would like to take Mr. Stroud up on some of them?
Yes, indeed. So, Mr. Stroud, so we saw with Hurricane Ivan the significant damages that were caused to schools and the support or psychosocial support that was needed for students, that is basically getting them in the mindset of feeling safe, feeling safe, feeling calm, feeling hopeful in the post-disaster stage. So what are the plans of the ministry for restarting schools quickly after a hurricane and for providing psychosocial support to the children?
Okay, so again, thank you for the question and thanks for the opportunity to share. The ministry has a holistic view when it comes to emergencies and disasters. So it would not be necessarily after hurricanes per se, but after any emergency. And so the ministry has always, especially after Ivan, has taken the concerted effort to make sure that each school every year presents to the chief education officer's desk a plan for the year, which involved in that plan is an emergency plan that each school determines to enact in the event of an emergency, whatever possible emergency. And of course, we can't come for every single thing that can go wrong, but basically, what do you plan to do? What are some of the things that you intend to do with your students? What are some of the places? What are some of the items that you need? And all of those things that will be included in that plan. And each school is supposed to submit that plan to the Ministry of Education so that we can have in central ministry every school's plan so that we might be able to monitor, guide, and so on. Now, that is something that is done on a yearly basis. We encourage schools to make sure that is done. We do have sometimes some shortfalls, but it's something that our education officers, those who are responsible for school administration, really works hard with our students, with our schools, to make sure that is done every year so that we have an idea. Every school has an idea, a deliberate idea as to what needs to be done. So that is one of the basic things and the major things that we do in terms of making sure that in case of any emergency, each school has a plan that the ministry is fully aware of and endorses or asks to augment or asks to change in order to make sure that it is consistent with some of the realities that are on the ground. From a psychosocial perspective, the Ministry of Education, the Student Support Services Unit has always been active when it comes to incidents within our schools on a yearly to weekly basis. We have some resident counselors in most of our secondary schools, and so what we have as a unit is what we refer to as a critical incident stress debriefing model that we follow, a protocol that we follow, where in the event of any disaster, in the event of any emergency, entities within our unit will make an assessment. Every single counselor will be on call whenever, and I mean, everybody knows as staff of the Ministry of Education, staff of the counseling department, they are aware that any emergency that everybody comes on call. We may not necessarily call every single person based on the assessment that is done, and based on what we need in terms of the personnel. everybody may not be called to go to a place or to follow up in terms of doing debriefing with students or so, or with teachers or parents even. But at least everybody knows that everybody's on call and is there waiting for the possibility to be called to a specific place also. So a lot of this happened after Ivan. A lot of this happened during and after COVID. So those of you may be aware of the Counsel and Call program. All of these things were done because of that protocol that we have established to make sure that even we couldn't have the immediate contact with our children and our students, our teachers, but that they knew that we were present and we made sure that they are aware of the fact that psychosocial support is available. I want to kind of also plug on to one of the things that James spoke to, and that encouraging our schools and our teachers to teach, especially lessons from our individual perspective. I know Mr. Douglas will expand a lot on that, but that's one of the things from a psychosocial perspective. One of the things that we work with, especially from our counselors, is that of the values. We teach values. Now, while we cannot teach values as a specific subject per se, because again, there are so many things that we have to do. One of the things that we try and do when we are working with any of those values, that we bring in content that speaks to, we integrate. So, for example, if we're going to be talking about yourself, the self, and your hygiene, even simple things like that, we bring in the fact that you have a responsibility to your environment around you and those things like that. So, while it is not a topic, or while it is not a subject, climate change, these are some of the things that we do on a deliberate basis for our children in our school system.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stroud. It's good to hear that so much is being done in regards to the psychosocial needs of students. I think now I can hand over to Godfrey to continue.
Well, there's quite a number of follow-up questions I would like to ask, but we would take a short break, and when we come back, I would engage Ms. James again just before we bring in Mr. Douglas, because I think he has a lot to say. So stay with us, folks. We'll be back in just a moment.
From the farm to the store to your home, supporting farmers, catering for your needs. The Food Fair Supermarket provides fresh fruits and vegetables from its 2 convenient locations for over 5 decades. The Food Fair Supermarkets, where you can fill your baskets without emptying your pockets.
Building or renovating your home or business? Why not use clean, renewable energy? Install solar panels to power your home and office and see your energy costs go down and your savings go up. Using renewable solar-powered energy protects our environment, reduces our carbon footprint, and slows the devastating impact of climate change. Republic Bank can help to finance construction and renovations that make use of renewable energy. Visit any Republic Bank branch and ask about renewable energy financing options today.
Republic Bank, we're the one for you.
How do you choose your toilet paper? Just because it's soft and nice. That's how I choose my toilet paper. Made right here in the Isle of Spice. Cherish Springs off Harbor Bay. Super value every day. The price is right and locally they're made. Support local when you purchase Cherish and other quality brands from Grenada Paper Products.
Solar Vision is the champion. We lighten up the whole Caribbean. Solar Vision is the champion. We lighten the whole Caribbean. The ultimate solution to get rid of pollution. We're going green to be healthy. Going green for security. Going green for prosperity. Going green with Solar Vision. We're going green.
Available at Grenada Trade Center, Monrouge, St. George. For more information, call 444-5291 or 404-9012.
Do you have muscular pain that no one can find a solution for? Are you tired of taking meds for joints and other pains? Hills and Valley Medicare Center on Grenville Street, St. George is here to help you heal. We will help you map a path to your full recovery. Visit us Monday to Saturday for a consultation with our on-site doctor, physiotherapist, and massage team. You will be glad you did. Our Medicare Center, a proud member of the Hills and Valley group of companies. On the hilltop or in the valley, we are with you wherever life takes you. Hills and Valley Pharmacy. Your health is our business.
Our environment is our responsibility. Budget Marine contributes by selling environmentally friendly products. For example, we sell lightweight open boats that require a relatively small engine. Best to combine with our Tohatsu 4-stroke engines. They use little fuel and have a low emission. Carib Marine solar panels are specially made to withstand the Caribbean climate. The panels are suitable for use at home and on the boat. The required chargers and converters are also available from Budget Marine. Keeping your car and boat clean extends the lifespan. But residues of the cleaning products disappear in nature. We at Budget Marine sell eco-friendly cleaning products from EcoWorks, not harmful to nature and also clean very well. Plastic junk in our oceans is a major problem. Fortunately, there are companies that clean up and reuse the plastic into usable products. Marlowe, manufacturer of lines and ropes, produces docking lines made out of plastic waste. Another company is Sperry Shoes. Sperry has a collection made from used fabrics and plastic waste. Just a few examples of how we at Budget Marine contribute to help protecting our environment. We care.
Welcome back, everyone. It's our Climate Reality, episode 8 of season 2. In case you joined us late, we're talking climate change and education. And we have with us from the Ministry of Education, Ms. Nyla James, Mr. Jason Douglas, and Mr. Pearson Stroud, all looking at different aspects of the intervention. Ms. James, I want to come back to you. In the first part of the discussion, some of the risks came to the fore. Now these risks are on one side of the climate change equation. The other side is the contributions that the sector is making to greenhouse gas emissions. Is that something you look at in your strategic planning process? And if so, what are the main sources of the emissions, and how do you plan to reduce the emissions from the sector?
All right. So I actually love that question, Godfrey, because I believe that more often than not, we might overlook education as one of the sectors contributing to the emissions and, increasing the carbon footprint. I think a lot of people associate that with maybe large factories, and it's simply untrue. If you think about it from the perspective of a school, or rather just from that angle, let's think about electricity. We must use electricity in all of our schools, and we know that we have to get light for the students in classes. We have heating and cooling systems, and with our e-learning program, so many devices to charge. And of course, we understand that that's one of the factors that would contribute to some of the emissions that you speak of. So within our little bubble here, we still understand that, and of course, it's important for us to plan accordingly. So with this example I just gave, we are now trying as best as we can to incorporate technologies and interventions like solar or LED lighting, for instance. Even when we think about purchasing equipment for the schools, we try as much as we can to ensure that they follow any sort of energy efficient code. I spoke about the smart building designs earlier. In fact, there is a renewable energy project which started around 2 or so years back, where education is the beneficiary, and by education, of course, more extensively the schools here. All of our secondary schools, and I would say over 80% of the primary schools, benefited from getting solar lights, so that at night you don't have to leave the lights on, which would contribute to those emissions, but rather we have solar lighted systems rather. We are also conscious of maybe the effects of deforestation. I know it was touched on when you had that segment on agriculture earlier. And so it means when we're thinking about a location for a school, all of those things come to the forefront. Are we going to tamper with any area or land where we can impact the environment negatively and, increase that carbon footprint that we speak about? So we think about that. We think about the materials we use when it comes to the construction of the schools. And so even something as simple as waste management. Now, in schools, we know we have the school feeding program and any other waste that might be coming, let's say, from the kitchen. And we have evidence, or at least some of the research shows that even that can contribute quantities of methane gas. So what we want is to support the schools and, encourage them to find ways to minimize any wastage or spoilage, cooking just enough, all of those little interventions form part of the planning process. If you think of the supplies that we send to schools, it requires us to plan strategically as well. If you have, let's say, 3 schools in a particular area or zone, it would make more sense to plan and decide what supplies they have to get and do so in one day, as opposed to sending the vehicle to drop off to this school today, and tomorrow a school that's perhaps 3 minutes away would also receive supplies. So we understand that the sector can, in its own way, contribute to some of these emissions. And I think the planning is important, and understanding how we can support the schools, how we can get all of our stakeholders, and all our players to understand how we're contributing to it and what we can do to reduce some of the risk. I would say the other strategies when it comes to the planning and maybe the mitigation and reduction of our footprint would be to forge partnerships with people who are involved in sustainability measures. You see, it requires, I would say, a cultural shift. And so if we have to get that cultural shift, if we have to get all of our teachers and students to understand what is happening, is that we need people on board who are part of that. It is governmental or non-governmental agencies. We need that support. And I think the fact that we're discussing this, it means that we are already in a good place, Godfrey. Whatever programs and initiatives we're developing, we have those things in mind. And I think you're going to see a lot more coming from us in the new year.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. When you said a while ago, these are things you have in your mind, I was hoping, hey, it won't stay there, but they will be executed and get things in place. So we've spoken quite a bit, psychosocial support. We've heard from Ms. James as it relates to planning, infrastructure and other things. I think one of the most important things now has to do with the education, so to speak, the academics. And so I know Martina wants to engage Mr. Douglas on that. Martina?
Thank you, Godfrey. I actually have so many questions. The discussion has been so interesting so far.
Well, I'll tell you what,
so many questions.
I'm sure my producer won't mind giving us a little extra time to get them in.
Okay, no problem, yes. Or we can also do a part 2 to this.
Oh, definitely.
Mr. Douglas, my question is a simple question, but the answer may have some layers. Is climate change a part of the official curriculum that is taught in our schools?
And Martina, thank you for the question. As you said, a simple question, but it would have some layers indeed. The simple answer would be yes, but to just elaborate a bit, in our schools, I'll start with the primary. The curriculum really is what runs education. The curriculum informs you as to what it is you're teaching and how it is you're going to attain your objectives. It also speaks to assessment procedures and so on, where you would assessment for learning, assessment of learning. Right? So along with the curriculum, we use at the primary schools the OECS primary grades learning standards, which tells you the attainment standards that the students must reach at that level. And it's organized basically, just giving us so that you understand, just to give a backdrop, organized into basically 5 strands. So we look at earth and space science, for example, life science, physical science, technology. And then there's also a strand dealing with science, technology, society, and environment. Now, we use, as you'd say, a spiral curriculum, where these 5 strands in the primary schools, from kindergarten right up to grade 6, basically it's the same 5 strands, but as you advance in level, you basically keep adding onto it. Okay, so at the lower levels, you may not see the words climate change, but if you really were to look at the standards and you look at the curriculum, you realize that infused in the curriculum is the whole aspect of climate change and the realities of climate change. So for the little ones, 4+5, the kindergarten and so on, you may start speaking about weather. Weather really is a precursor to understanding climate, and then you would move on later on. So students, for example, in our primary system, I'll start with the primary system, they basically understand about the air or resources around us and how vital it is for us to conserve. They understand the whole aspect, bringing it really real life to them concerning waste and litter and the responsibility. I think Mr. Short spoke about the whole idea of values, right? So these things are taught in a very practical way, where students are taught to know about litter, the school environment, how it could create problems, and the responsibilities that they have to reduce these starting with the school environment. Okay, recycling. Students are also taught recycling and other treatments of litter to prevent those environmental problems we spoke of. My colleague, Ms. James, spoke of rainwater harvesting and so on. If you had a chance to view our recently held National Science Fair, you'd realize you'd have seen the curriculum in action. And many of those projects there really spoke to climate smart practices. We saw a number of rainwater harvesting projects. And where did that come from? Right? It really is the practical, putting the theory into practice. So all of those things that are being taught in the curriculum, students have an opportunity as well to manifest those in projects and so on. Different ways we use to assess the students, assess their learning, and for them to showcase what it is they are actually learning. One I remember was showing conservation methods, and one of the methods how we could use the seawater to conserve wood. Right? They actually went on to test over months to see, the length of time it would take, and all of these great ideas. All of this really comes from the curriculum and could apply to the climate change, the strategies that we could use to minimize our carbon footprint, right, is infused in the curriculum. So as you move on in grades and so on, the students get to understand that as humans, we must realize that in our attempts to understand the world, we cannot exploit our environment to fulfill our needs. these are things that the curriculum speaks to, right? Because all of our actions have consequences. Okay, we speak of science and technology, but there's also the balance, because unplanned and excessive science and technology activities may destroy the earth as we know it, right? So all of these things, we have to have a balance, and there must be planning. So in the curriculum, it speaks to the whole idea of, oil exploration, speaks to global warming, speaks of fracking, and all of these things. Our natural resources, students learn from the curriculum that they don't last forever. They understand the differences between renewables and non-renewable energy, sources of energy. And so as they're learning this in the curriculum, they actually seeing what's happening in the world around them and be able to apply what's happening. So it's embedded and infused in the curriculum, and as I said, it's spiral, and as they go higher, for example, when they get to grade 5, grade 6, and so on, that's where they go deeper into types of pollution, right? How they could minimize pollution, whether it's land, air, marine, etc. And they learn all about those things, the seriousness and importance of having policies, right, that would help us. The feasibility of renewables. So we've been hearing in Grenada that speaking about geothermal and all of that. The students are already learning that in the curriculum from the primary school. So from the primary school levels, they are learning that. When we come to the secondary schools, we have the lower secondary, forms 1 and 2, and then you have the upper secondary. But at all levels, the students are learning the human impact on the environment. And it's important to stress here that we continue to stress to the students the responsibilities that they have, because everyone could start with themselves. Everyone could start with themselves in their homes, and then the schools and teachers make that very clear to students so that they understand the whole idea of greenhouse effects, global warming, and climate change as a consequence. Students are learning that in the curriculum, and of course not just in the sciences, because in the social studies as well, they learn about myself, right? At a very lower level, they learn about themselves, and then they move on to learn about themselves and family, community, and how they could impact the environment as well. Okay, in the secondary schools, as students get to Form 3, that's where, in most schools, that's where they would choose subjects and so on, and branch off into all the different aspects. But in each and every one, you would find that there is something that speaks to climate change, ways of mitigating, minimizing our risk to climate change, the ways that we could reduce our carbon footprint, and how we can be more responsible citizens. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Douglas. So it's good to hear of all the efforts that are being made to teach our students about the different ways for climate change adaptation and mitigation. They may not know it in that form as yet, but they are learning it seems, almost every day. I'm going to hand back over to Godfrey now to tell us what's next.
I want to ask Mr. Douglas a question quickly. Earlier Mr. Stroud made reference to that, the whole issue of climate change being infused into the system. But my question is, I hear what you're saying in different forms, but our students, are they really making the connection? I mean, with what they're learning in the curriculum? Because it is not a direct subject per se, but infused, and it comes up in different subject areas. Can they make the connection, or are they making the connection with what they're learning and what is actually happening as it relates to changing climatic conditions?
Right, so thank you for that question. The thing is with students, right? Learning takes place over time, and sometimes it's not easy to change behavior. especially, you know how it is sometimes if you're the only one that seems to stand up, it seems as if, you know, you would just go with the flow. But I believe that our students are getting the message, right? I believe they're getting the message. Why? More so too because of what is happening in our world around us. So it's no longer the curriculum just in black and white on paper. The students are actually experiencing the effects of climate change. You could go to a kindergarten class in September and they could tell you the place hot. They experience the heat, they know what it's like. So now when with the teaching, when you come now to explain what is actually happening, the students have something to connect it to, right? I made reference, you know, because sometimes I think about the same question: are we having an impact? Are we seeing changes? Are they getting it? And I really looked at that last science fair and I saw what the students produced, and I realized the students, they are getting it because I saw them putting into practice the principles, right? And these things, to change attitudes and change behavior, that's where the education comes in. So we want to see that change happening on a day-to-day basis. How they deal with a simple thing as litter in the class, how they treat the environment, how they take care of the environment, right? I know that that I have two sons as well who are in secondary schools, and they could, if something is off, they could correct you, whether you know it's the lighting or the water. They know about conservation, right? So I believe that we are getting to our students. I believe that the education is making an impact. I believe it would have a great impact, not just in the short term, but also in the long term, right? Because what I have seen, being in education, having been in education myself for over 25 or so years, is that you have a number of students opting to go into STEM fields, right? So fields to do with science, technology, engineering, mathematics, even environmental science, and all of these areas, some of the non-traditional areas, you find more and more students are opting to go into these areas. So somehow I believe that we are having an impact with the curriculum, with the teaching, and bringing those principles and concepts across to them. Yes.
Okay. Martina, any questions you would like to ask any of the other guests as it relates to the discussion?
Yes. So I'm happy you mentioned, Mr. Douglas, about the heat, like the kindergartners feeling the heat and they're able to tell you about it. So this question is back to Mr. Stroud. How does the ministry or the schools, how are they able to identify the students that most need psychosocial support during the stressing time when there is some extreme event, whether it's a hurricane, the heat wave, flooding, and so on?
So, again, as I indicated earlier on, in terms of our secondary schools, that becomes a little bit easier because we have resident counselors. And so whether it's a teacher, I'm referring, the children will refer themselves at times. Assessments done from the counselors having function in the school on a daily basis. You know your students. The children have a relationship with the counselors. They know that they can go. The counselors do guidance sessions, so they have face-to-face contact with the children on a weekly basis in each of the classes. And so the counselors are there and they can see. This becomes a little bit more challenging in the primary schools where we have one counselor visiting more than one school, and so it becomes more it's becoming more dependent relationship, a codependent relationship in terms of the schools referring children, and primarily what we ask teachers and school leaders to do. If you know a child has a particular tendency to be a particular way, so a child is a jovial child, he's normally really all about the place, having fun, they always have to call his name, and all of a sudden today he's just not that person. We ask you to pay attention to things like that, and you get in contact with the counselors, and we at least make some assessment to see if it's just a child having a bad day or if there's a need for that. So primarily, as I said, in the secondary school, the counselors are our residents, so we are able to have that interaction almost immediately. For the private schools, takes a little bit more time, but really our teachers cooperated us, and principals and school leaders cooperated us in a very significant way in helping to recognize the possible risks and that the children are assessed, and if there's a determination that they might need more intensive face-to-face work, then we do that.
Right. I have a question I want to put out there. I'm not sure between Ms. James and Mr. Douglas who is going to address it, but climate change is happening rapidly, faster than scientists anticipated some years ago. It's happening. Ms. James, as it relates to planning, will we get to a point where maybe a student or so can actually graduate from school with a certificate in climate change? I don't know, Ms. James, Mr. Douglas. Planning, curriculum. I don't know which one of you is going to take this one.
Well, I can start, and then I don't know if Mr. Douglas would add anything to that. From a planning perspective, if we're talking about a student, now remember, a student is not confined to a particular age group. So it can be an older student, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because now we're starting to see the effects of climate change. It means that some of the offerings we have, we are now on this pathway towards TVET and skill certification. It's a very big deal for us. We have our national TVET policy that was approved, and a strategy for TVET enhancement, and that includes introduction of sixth form and centers of excellence. So if we're talking about that, then of course we would need to decide the program offerings. And if we're talking about program offerings and we have programs included which can focus on those areas, then certainly we can have students graduating in the sense of graduating or completing with some of these very specific areas or qualifications. So I think definitely it is a possibility. As for the age group, it might be more so the older ones if we're thinking about it and where we would put some of these programs. So I don't know what Mr. Douglas has to add, if anything.
And you know, Martina, I think also with the many opportunities now, yes, climate change has its devastating effects, but there are many opportunities available as you know, climate change rages on. So you know, it might be a good thing for students at this age to start looking and paying attention so that they can tap into some of the opportunities. Mr. Douglas?
Yes, I want to agree with you fully, because you know, when you think education, education doesn't just happen within the classroom. And as you rightly said, there are many opportunities, especially after COVID. A plethora of platforms have opened up. Students have the opportunity. So even though the education system as it is now may not have an offering specific to climate change, there are offerings in Coursera, different areas that students could actually pursue and gain certification. You know, it's usually said that in terms of change, one of the last to usually change is education, because you kind of have a sort of stability. But with the change in times and with what's happening in our world, it's very important that the education system becomes a lot more flexible, right? A lot more flexible, and the word you would hear around, you know, is agile. We need a more agile system, one that could respond and not just react when things happen. So, I mean, it would be great to see that happen. We can't take it off the table and say it will never happen, right? But I think the way things are going, there's a possibility. You know, there are other things happening. For example, the OECS, even after the COVID and so on, you may have heard about the PEARL, the Program for Educational Advancement and Relevant Learning, right? Relevant learning. So this whole thrust to engage students in a very meaningful way, so that they could make a meaningful contribution and make it a lot more hands-on and hands-on approach, active learning approach to everything that they're doing. So I hope that at one day, probably in the future, we could say, this is an expert in climate change. It's needed.
Yes, indeed. Martina, we're way out of time, but I would have to agree with you that we may need a part 2, and I know P.S. Moraine is listening, so I'm making a public a plea here so that he can approve you guys or some other people coming back to continue this discussion on education. So, I'm going to give you all 30 seconds. Let's start with Mr. Stroud to make your final closing comments.
The only thing I'd like to say, of course, thanks for the opportunity, for the minister giving us an opportunity to share. And sometimes not always, people don't always know what's happening. Maybe that's part of our responsibility. We do our best to make sure that we help our students to understand that they are whole persons and they have a responsibility to themselves and to others, and that they are to understand that the values that we hold dear within our country are things that we want to make sure that they also grow up exhibiting, and that has to do with taking the cooperative responsibility of knowing that when I do something, it's not just about me and what I do, but the fact that it can affect others. And so we just want to continue to do our best to help our young people, and of course the older ones, because the reality is that we have to extend education. Mr. James knows that we've spoken so many times of the fact that our schools become, what should I say, white elephants after 2:30, and we seriously have considered and have significant discussions as to using those compounds for educating the older ones, because my concern here, and I know I'm past 30 seconds, forgive me for that, is that we work with the children in the schools, but then when they go home, what we teach sometimes can be unlearned, or sometimes it's not reinforced. And so we have to extend that to the older ones as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. James, from our discussion, all that has been said, if there is something in there that you would like our listeners, viewers to take with them, what would it be?
I would say for the viewers to understand, the listeners to understand that education is aware of the challenges. And I think the most important thing is that we are willing to support. We are constantly trying to devise systems to support and to make the sector and its implementation a lot better, and to have better experiences for our students. So definitely look out for some things in the new year. We're certainly trying to work with our stakeholders to ensure that the sector remains the most important one, because we're responsible for all the human resource capital within the country. So bear with us, work with us, and we appreciate the support.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Douglas, what one thing you would like our audience to take away from this program this evening?
Well, that climate change and its effects is real, and that to be resilient, it means that we have to be able to adapt. PS, and I'll probably close with this because there are many things I can say, to encourage schools and so on to continue doing some of the things that they are doing. But PS loves a quote by Alvin Toffler, and I'll just end with this. He says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that is what is needed in this time.
Thank you very much. Well, that's all the time we have. Martina, what would you like to leave with our audience?
Okay, thanks again, Godfrey, for having me co-host with you tonight. I just want to encourage the audience to continue learning and relearning about climate change, and continue being involved in the national dialogues and processes, because it affects all of us.
Yes, indeed. And I would just like to close by saying something I mentioned earlier. Education is a critical agent in addressing the issue of climate change. Education can encourage people to change their attitudes and behavior. Education also helps them to make informed decision. As Mr. Douglas said, climate change is real. We must act now. That's our program this evening, folks. We thank you for viewing. Those of you who listened, thank you very much. And we're looking forward to being back with you next Wednesday for another episode of Our Climate Reality. Have a good evening. All the best.
Our Climate Reality comes to you compliments Republic Bank, we're the one for you. Classic Lighting, Budget Marine Grenada, Spicer Imaging Center, Hubbard's, Grenada Paper Products, Quick and Easy, Royal, and Horizon Paper Towels.